The Flash is about to come out soon on June 16th. Or, I don't know, maybe it's already out. Maybe you're already seen it and you're watching this video. I don't know. Either, depending on my release schedule, it will either be on the day it comes out or it will be a little bit afterwards. However, this boom is about to bring a conclusion, kind of, to the DC Extended Universe. Now, for those of you who might not know what the DC Extended Universe is, the DC Extended Universe, or the DCEU for short, is kind of like DC's interconnected universe of movies and TV shows that was kind of used to compete with the MCU. By the way, just a little fun fact here, the DC Extended Universe was never officially a term used by Warner Brothers. It was actually a name that was created by a writer for Entertainment Weekly, and until recently it was never called the DCEU, the DC Extended Universe, by DC or Warner Brothers themselves. Hell, they even tried to come up with like their own little term for it, like the Justice League universe or even the worlds of DC, but none of them really stuck, as these names just kind of suck, I'm gonna be honest. I mean, DCEU, the Extended Universe, isn't a good name either, but like, they never really gave themselves a better option. Now, the DCEU has had its up and downs throughout the years, with this year in particular being its 10th anniversary, with Man of Steel coming out in 2013, and the last movie of this universe, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, coming out later this year in 2023. So, 2013, 2023, 10 years. It's a way to go out on your anniversary, on your 10th year anniversary. Now, after that, a new movie universe will be created by James Gunn and Peter Safran. Now, this universe is called the DC Universe, which I don't know how I really feel about that. It feels very generic. However, this new universe will be kicking off with the animated series The Creature Commandos, but it's been said that their Superman movie, Superman Legacy, will actually be the kickoff to it, but they're still saying Creature Commandos, and the live action show Waller is still in this universe, so it's not the official start, but we're going to get into the whole DC Universe, DC Studios thing later. Now, I have been a DC fan for a long time now, but I mostly grew up with Marvel as a kid, and I didn't really get to understand DC that much until I started watching comic book creators here on YouTube, and ever since then I kind of fell in love with the DC Universe in a lot of ways. And especially, there's just a bunch of their movies that I love too. Like, when it comes to Batman, I love the, Dark Knight, of course, everyone loves the Dark Knight, and the Tim Burton movies are my favorite in particular, and also the new one that just came out, The Batman, that came out like a little over a year ago. And I really like the first Christopher Reeve Superman movie too. However, when it comes to the movies of this DCEU, I've, on average, never felt completely satisfied, or I didn't really feel like I really enjoyed these movies as much as I did movies like The Dark Knight or the Christopher Reeve Superman movie when I left the theaters, or just stopped watching them as a whole. Now, the Flash movie is meant to be used in a way to kind of change the direction of the DC cinematic universe in a new direction going forward, and with this new change on the horizon, I figured it would be a good time as ever to kind of look back on what the DCU was and see what worked and see what didn't work. And who knows, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I ended up liking these movies a little bit more after watching it. But with that being said, we might as well jump into this video. Now, I'm going to cover the DCEU in 4 parts. I'm going to talk about the Snyderverse, I'm going to talk about the Gunverse, like the Suicide Squad, Peacemaker, stuff like that, and I'm going to cover the Rockverse. And I will be covering a 4th part in which I kind of talk about other different directions that the DCEU kind of tried to go in, but that is outside of these 3 parts, like what The Rock wanted to do, what James Gunn wanted to do, and what Zack Snyder wanted to do. But first off, I'm going to talk about the infamous Snyderverse. Now, when I refer to the Snyderverse, I'm mostly talking about 3 movies that Zack Snyder directed in the DC wheelhouse. So we got The Man of Steel, BVS, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, the long ass title, and Justice League. Well, Zack Snyder's Justice League, or Justice League the Snyder Cut, whatever you want to call it. Now, I am fully aware of how hardcore the Snyderverse fanbase is, so I'm just going to be upfront. If you like the Snyderverse, that's completely fine. This video is not meant to talk down to fans who like these movies, whether it's these ones or the other ones I'm going to be talking about. It's just meant to kind of discuss my personal opinions on these movies in general. If you like them, that's fine. But I have my grievances with them. I'm going to voice them out. And I'm also going to be used to kind of talk about the direction of DC when it came to their cinematic universe. And I feel like if I'm going to talk about it, I should talk about the movies themselves and my opinions on it. I just want to get that out of the way because I want to talk about these movies, but I don't want to face the harassments of a bunch of fanboys who just don't like my opinion, alright? However, after watching all three of these movies, I had to say I did find a couple of things that I do like about these movies. These movies are pretty good to watch. There's plenty of good moments in them, but overall I'm just not a big fan of them, and in a lot of cases they were pretty rough to watch. However, in all fairness, even though I didn't particularly like these movies, I will still talk about the things that I liked about them at the end, so we can at least end on a high note. Now, I figured it wouldn't be a more fit topic to talk about than to open up with Superman when it comes to these movies. Now, he's basically the main character of this trilogy. He's in every single movie. It's mostly following his journey for the most part. However, Snyder's portrayal of Superman has sparked a lot of debate amongst fans since Man of Steel came out. So it's been like 10 years of this debate about how Zack Snyder wanted Superman to be portrayed. Now, I just want to say this. I don't think Snyder gets Superman in a way. I do believe that there are moments where Snyder does capture what Superman is meant to be, and he does capture him really well. Like there's that scene in BVS where there's just him saving people, and that's like, in my opinion, the best part of that movie outside of the warehouse scene. But there's a lot of moments in these movies where I just don't think he really gets it. He paints Superman as this man who is just looking to do the right thing regardless of what people say, which is good. That is how Superman should be portrayed. He's just a normal dude who just has these powers, who just wants to go out and do the right thing. However, a lot of his story kind of centers around if he should help people or not. At least in the first two movies. In the Snyderverse, in the Snyder Cut, it doesn't really play that much of a role, but in the first two movies, BVS and Man of Steel, it plays a pivotal role that I really do not like. Now, when it comes to Superman, you can always kind of tell how the portrayal of him is going to go based on how Martha and Jonathan Kent are portrayed. Because when Superman gets sent here, he is a baby. He has no memory of Laura or Jor-El. Jonathan and Martha raise him, so a lot of how the Superman is portrayed says a lot about how Martha and Jonathan are as characters, and a lot of directors will reflect that onto those characters. But in my opinion, the way that Martha and Jonathan Kent are portrayed in these movies is outrageous. When Jonathan Kent basically says that Clark should have let an entire buzz of children die to keep his secret safe, that's when I could tell Snyder didn't really understand Superman or his world all that well, especially his relationship to his father. Clark becomes the man who he is because of the morals that Jonathan and Martha parted onto him. But Man of Steel makes it seem like this is just a part of his Krypton DNA that makes him want to do good, but Martha and Jonathan Kent are trying to rip him away from that. Like, no, don't do good. No. And you could say, oh, this is like them just trying to be protective over him. In my opinion, I would label this as bad parenting. You have this son who can do anything, who can help anyone, and you're teaching him not to use it and to be selfish. I mean, hell, in BVS, when Clark goes to Martha for advice, she says that Clark doesn't have to be Superman because he doesn't owe the world anything because they don't give anything to him. But that is just insane. Clark has always wanted to do good regardless of what people think, even though he doesn't get anything in exchange for that. But his parents kept putting him down for wanting to do so. And since we are on the topic of Superman and his Earth parents, that tornado scene is stupid. I know I'm beating a dead horse here when it comes to that scene. Everyone hates the scene. I don't even think Snyderverse fans love this scene. But it just symbolizes the whole problem of the Kents in these movies. They just kind of suck. We also need to talk about the neck snapping scene, both in terms of how it embodies Snyder's Superman and how dumb that scene is too. We'll start with the latter. So the reason why Superman snapped Zod's neck is because Zod was about to use his heat vision to kill innocents as Superman holds his head, trying to keep him from doing so. Now, I know this scene has its defenders in more ways than one. First of all, there are people who point out that Superman has killed before in a comic as a defense to the scene. Now, I don't think this works as a defense for the scene because there are writers in the comic scene who are just assigned books, or maybe they do want to write a book about this character, but that doesn't mean that they understand the character as well, because if they did, they would understand that Superman or like other superheroes like him wouldn't kill in these circumstances. Now, people will refer to Injustice. In my opinion, Injustice is fine because it's over there. It's a chance to experiment with the norms. But I just find it weird in the scene that is in a movie centered around how Superman is a person who just naturally wants to do good things, and the first villain he comes across, he snaps his neck. I don't think that's a good defense at all. I don't think it's good representation for the movie that it's in. However, there are also those people who say that, well, Superman didn't see any other way out of stopping Zod. But by that logic, if Superman had the strength to snap his neck, he should have had the strength to just tilt his head up, or use his hand to block his vision, or just fly up, or literally anything else instead of snapping his neck. Now, while I did just kind of rag on about the portrayal of this character, and now there's a bunch of scenes that I don't think really work, I do have to say my only problem with the Superman of this universe is how Zack Snyder wants him to be portrayed. Because Henry Cavill, the actor for Superman in these movies, does do a great job when he has good material to work with. But it's the material that he's given that doesn't work well and causes the character to just seem off in these movies. However, back to the neck snapping scene, there's also a big problem with how violent Superman is at times. In BVS, Superman is put on trial for being framed for murdering a bunch of African soldiers. Even though there definitely would have been evidence otherwise, I'm pretty sure, even if the soldiers are burned, I'm pretty sure, forensic scientists could have found, bullets inside them and be like, huh, that's weird. Why would Superman need to use bullets? Maybe he was framed. I don't know. Or maybe, the CIA could have said that they knew that there were mercenaries in the area. I mean, they already had some sort of intelligence, right? The scene doesn't make sense. But whatever. In the scene where the soldiers are killed, Superman shows up to save Lois Lane from a warlord who is holding her hostage. Now keep in mind, the warlord isn't superpowered. He's just a normal dude. He has blood. If he gets punched, he gets hurt. He's a normal dude just like us. And Superman sends him through four walls. And you cannot convince me otherwise that that guy isn't dead. And you may say, oh, he's a warlord. He's probably killed hundreds of people. That doesn't make it right. I don't care. Murder isn't justified for someone who has committed murder. You're supposed to be better than the other person, and Superman just isn't in these movies. And the thing that just makes this scene even worse is that Superman could have easily just destroyed the gun. I mean, yeah, he held it to her head, but if Superman was fast enough to send him through four walls, he was definitely fast enough to, destroy the gun or block the bullet before it came out. I don't know, it just doesn't work. There's also a scene in the Snyder Cut where he is just over Steppenwolf, just using his heat vision on him, just beating him down. And while yes, Steppenwolf is tough and would need a lot to keep him down, we saw that Superman was more than capable of just beating him up. And that scene where he's just standing over him just makes him look like a bad guy. It makes him look like a supervillain, like some sort of demon. When he's supposed to be this big, brightful piece of hope, and he's just looking like an absolute monster. Hell, even though it's not just Superman, they slaughter Steppenwolf while they're sending him through a portal to Darkseid, who probably would have just killed him anyways. It just feels like these movies are full of overkill of the villains for no particular reason. I mean, goddamn, did they have to perform their Mortal Kombat fatality on him? Like, jeez, man, he was probably gonna get slaughtered anyway. It's Darkseid. Also, before I end this rant about Superman, I just gotta say, he's not Jesus. Zack Snyder has like this thing where he just forces Jesus imagery with Superman in these movies. It's just bad and it doesn't work. It feels like it's less of like I'm trying to say something and then more like I'm trying to force this down your throat. I just don't like it. It's really bad. Moving away from Superman finally, and something I feel like would help the Snyder movies a little bit more in terms of them just being a little bit more bearable to watch. What if he just cut the unnecessary fluff in these movies? Like, every movie has its sort of like side plot or scenes that just don't need to be in it and could have been cut. Don't get me wrong, that happens in a lot of movies. However, it feels like with these movies in particular, with how long they are, there's so many scenes that could just be cut and it would still be a full movie, or scenes that could have just been cut shortened. Like the lady singing by the beach after Arthur leaves after he's done talking to Bruce. Cut it out. Martha losing the house to the bank. Cut it out. It does nothing for the story. Clark in the church. Cut it out. It's just some random scene with no one that we're connected with. Clark going through the mountains. Cut it out. Again, I don't know why he had to go through that scene to learn that lesson. He could have just like, I don't know, listened to Lois about like how it was staged. There's so many fluff in these movies. There's so much nothing in these movies and it just drags these movies on. Now, BVS and The Batman by Matt Reeves are around the same length, around 3 hours long, with there only really being a few minutes difference between the two. However, in my opinion, The Batman seems a lot shorter in its runtime than it actually is, because it's very well paced. With a lot of fluff not being in that movie, it makes it feel like the movie is going at a faster rate than it actually is going. However, when it came to BVS, there's so much fluff in that movie, there's so much nothing in that movie when it comes to some of its scenes, and some of those scenes just drag on for way longer than they should, that makes the movie feel longer than it actually is. And hell, it only got worse with Zack Snyder's Justice League, which went on for around 4 hours, but it feels like 7 because of how much fluff there is in that movie. I mean, that scene where I was talking about like the women singing after Arthur leaves, it feels like it goes on way longer than it does, because it's just a nothing scene that just drags on for longer than it justifiably should. Speaking of Batman, I did actually like his portrayal in these movies, but I still do have my problems. Now, unlike Superman, I don't really have a problem with Batman killing in BVS. Now, we don't really get to see him kill anyone in like Snyder Cut, so I don't think it's really that much of a problem. So I'm just going to keep his portrayal in BVS like the centerfold of this little section where I talk about him. But in the movie, it does make a lot of sense. He is meant to be more grizzled. He's older. He's tired of the shit. He's going to let loose. And he's going to break his no-killing rule at some point. And I honestly understand it, especially because it is meant to be kind of like a betrayal of Batman from The Dark Knight Returns. However, in The Dark Knight Returns, Batman still doesn't kill people, and he makes it like a prominent point where he's like, we do not use guns, we do not kill people. But I don't know, I still, even though I don't feel like comic books should be like an exact adaptation of the source material in terms of story, like you should be able to come up with another story or an original story that isn't dependent on another piece of media. But I still think that if you're going to try to adapt a piece of media like this, you should at least try to capture what makes the character the character. And I think with Snyder capturing, or at least trying to capture a Dark Knight Returns Batman, I think he at least does a pretty well job doing that. Even though, again, I do have my problems with it. They're just very slight, not unlike Superman. And something that I feel like Zack Snyder really captures with this whole like Dark Knight Returns Batman in live action pretty well is that because of how kind of like crazy he's become, he's very set in his ways, which is very like what Batman is in particular, but especially Dark Knight Returns Batman, who is very set in his ways of doing things and won't do anything otherwise regardless of what people say. However, when we talk about this, we also had to talk about the scene that does get him to change, which is the Martha scene. Now, again, kind of like the tornado scene, people have talked about how terrible the scene is for years now. But I'm going to talk about it anyways, because it's just that bad. So, the reason why Bruce changes his mind about killing Superman is because he realizes by Clark saying Martha that he does have a mother. I think. I think that's what happens. Is that what happens? I mean, I saw the scene. I've seen the scene millions of times trying to come up with what it's supposed to. I know what it's supposed to be. I know it's supposed to have Bruce see that Clark is human. But I don't understand that. I don't know. It really is just because their moms share the same first name. Because Bruce mentions earlier that he is aware that he has parents on Earth. Like, he is aware that he has parents who raised him when he came to this Earth. But I guess that because his mom's name was Martha, he could finally realize, like, oh, this is bad. This is bad what I'm doing. His parents. His parents. You know he has parents, dude. You just talked about them, like, not even a minute ago before you tried to kill him with a spear. Like, this is just so bad. It makes no sense. Why is this here? Hell, Snyder could have had it be that when Bruce is wailing on Superman, he almost feels like he's becoming the Joker. Because, as we learn later on, Robin exists and was killed by the Joker in this universe. More than likely, even though we don't get into that scene, he could see it as him being the Joker and Superman being Robin, this like helpless Boy Scout who's just being beaten to death by this madman. Now again, we never get to see how Robin dies in these movies, but this could have been a great way for Batman to call back to a moment earlier in the movie where we see the Robin suit instead of it being a nothing scene that never gets called back on until the fucking Snyder Cut with Jared Leto's Joker, who's there for no reason. And B, it makes Batman's arc more believable, realizing how crazy he is instead of being surprised that someone is named Martha. This is just so dumb. Also, C, it allows you to build on your universe more instead of just being vague about everything. Now, there are plenty of things I could rant about regarding these movies, but I'm getting tired of talking about these movies, so I'm just gonna kind of list them off. Gal Gadot's acting in Justice League, especially the Kal-El line. It's fine everywhere else. It's fine in BVS. It's fine in Wonder Woman, which is kind of based in the Snyderverse. I didn't want to talk about it in movies like Aquaman because those were directed by other people with only like loose ties to the movies. They're very much standalone in their own regards. I just want to talk about the movies that he particularly directed because it was all based on his vision. Ezra Miller's performance as the Flash, and before anyone comments, I didn't like his performance before the crimes they committed. I still always have had a problem with his performance. I'm just not a fan of it. Speaking of Flash, the Flash running. No one runs like that. I mean, hell, Naruto running would have been more believable in these movies. The nightmare scenes, I just don't like them. They don't really serve a purpose. And apparently in the plans after this movie, this nightmare scenes weren't really meant to serve a purpose anyways. Outside of just like showing what's to come. But again, I feel like they could have been cut out. They're Lois Lane being the only thing that apparently is keeping Superman from killing everyone. Lois Lane being nothing more than a love interest as these movies go on. Jimmy Olsen being a CIA operative who is killed only minutes after meeting him. Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. He could have been great as like a Riddler type villain, but as Lex Luthor, it just sucks. Particularly when you came here you had an hour, now you have less. It's just bad. The only thing I like about his Lex Luthor is that little like church theme that he has going on, but even then it's not great. Doomsday, just in general. Speaking of Doomsday, why is everything gray? Everything is just so gray. Why is Krypton boring? Why does it feel like an offshoot Pandora? Why does Darkseid have church window panels? Is it meant to serve like the soul Superman Jesus thing with him being the devil? I mean, it wouldn't be bad, but it's kind of weird that Apocalypse has church window panels of Darkseid, giving us Martian Manhunter, and then just kind of doing nothing with him in this movie. Why is everything so gray? For the love of God, just add some goddamn color into these movies. Now, I did say I was going to talk about what I liked about in these movies, but before then, I do want to talk about what happened behind the scenes with Zack Snyder and WB. Basically, after Snyder lost his daughter to suicide, WB let him leave Justice League to spend time with his family. However, they ended up replacing him with Joss Whedon and decided to do a bunch of reshoots for the movie. Basically, they tried to get rid of as much of Snyder's vision as they could without really hurting that much of the movie, both on screen and off screen. I even found like some information regarding like the background in which a lot of pressure was put on Snyder with his Justice League movie because of how poorly received BVS was. Which again, I can't blame them. Kind of. BVS wasn't really that much of a hit with a lot of fans. They didn't really like it. So I could see why trying to focus on a new direction with the Justice League movie would have been great. But again, I think it made the product worse because obviously Snyder wanted to go one way and the studio wanted to go the other way. So trying to make both work at the same time was never going to work. With how much of a disaster the Justice League was, and with news regarding how bad it was behind the scenes following Snyder's exit, fans demanded Snyder should be allowed to make his version of the movie. And while it does have its problems, like I mentioned beforehand, it is overall a big step from the original. While a lot of the drive for this movie to be made was supposedly made by bots that the Snyderverse fans made, I am glad that Snyder did get to tell his full version of the story the way he wanted to tell it. Now moving on to what I liked about these movies, it's like what I did with like the last parts of like the stuff I hated. I'm just gonna kind of list them off because this part is already kind of getting a little bit longer than I want it to be. So the moments that I liked about these movies, here they are. Superman learning to fly, that is an overall good scene. I really like it. Russell Crowe as Jor-El, I feel like he is a way better father in these movies than Jonathan Kent is by a mile. Lois Lane actually being a journalist in Man of Steel and BVS. I feel like that's great, but I feel like there's also a bunch of parts in BVS and especially Justice League, the Snyder Cut, that is just her just being a love interest and never really offering that much outside of that. Perry White's also good in this, Lawrence Fishburne. It plays him very well. He's stern but also sympathetic at the same time. Ray Fisher as Cyborg, really great. The Snyder Cut really dived into a lot of his character, but again, I feel like that would have served better with a solo movie beforehand. But I still feel like his performance really delivers well in the Snyder Cut. Batman and Alfred's relationship, I also really like that scene where he's like, "This is Alfred. I work for him." It genuinely made me laugh. Talking about Batman too, him having charm in the Justice League. In my opinion, a Batman should always have a little bit of charm to them. Yeah, he's a big grizzled man who just wants to seek out vengeance and beat up bad people, but he should have some charm in him, you know? I mean, Christian Bale's Batman had a lot of charm to him when he was Bruce Wayne. Not so much Batman. I feel like it would be hard to kind of get that charm from a gravelly voice like that. But overall, I do think Ben Affleck, I think Ben Affleck is a very charming person in general. From the behind the scenes stuff that I've seen from him, and how he portrays, how he acts in other movies, and Chasing Amy, he seems very charming. You know, I like him. I think it was a great fit for Batman. I think that was the best casting choice outside of Henry Cavill as Superman that they made in this universe. However, that's kind of it. That's what I liked about Snyderverse. It's not a lot. But again, I do think these movies have its good parts, and when it's good, it's really good. There's plenty of things you can enjoy about these movies, and even if you don't agree with me, I'm still glad you were able to get some joy out of these movies. And if these are your preferred takes of the characters, while I might not agree, that's still an opinion you're allowed to have. And if these sort of conversations happen in the comments below, I hope we can at least do it with respect. Alright, new shirt. Same beanie, new day. I felt like I was kind of losing my voice with the whole Snyder thing, so it's a day later, and now we're gonna jump into James Gunn's, little Gunverse, as I like to call it. Now, James Gunn has been a point of contention since it was announced that he, alongside Peter Safran, were taking over the DC Cinematic Universe and would be going forward with their own movies kind of disconnected from the DCEU and the Snyderverse, even though they have said that they're still going to take elements from it since Flash is not like an official reboot. It's more like a soft reboot, kind of like a relaunch. Now, personally, I really like the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker, so I am looking forward to what Gunn has planned in the future in terms of like DC with him at the helm. However, we will get to what DC Studios is and what Gunn has planned with the cinematic universe in general. Now, Gunn has kind of made his own little project within the DC Cinematic Universe before this whole DC Studios DCU change with the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker, while there will be other projects with that too, like Waller and the Creature Commandos, that all kind of fit in this little universe that he has going on. Gunn has a habit ever since Suicide Squad of kind of taking these unknown characters and trying to do something with them to quite a bit of success, in all honesty. I mean, nobody knew who Peacemaker was before the Suicide Squad movie and the show, and very little people actually knew who the Guardians of the Galaxy were unless you were like a very hardcore Marvel fan. And I feel like he has really taken these unknown characters, added some new life into them, and has turned them into household names. Now, I don't think Peacemaker was as big as the Guardians of the Galaxy were, but like you can't deny like people really liked the Suicide Squad movie when it came out, and people really like the new Guardians of the Galaxy movie. It shows that he's able to take these characters and make them into household names by just allowing complete freedom with these characters that he wants to work with. However, a lot of criticism that Gunn has kind of gotten from critics of his online is that he only uses certain actors and certain actresses for his projects, but I feel like this is not a good argument to make because this is something that every filmmaker does. Like, surprisingly, filmmakers will choose certain people that they like to work with on their movies. And if I were to give a valid criticism of Gunn and his movies, is that I feel like instead of using the same actors, I would feel like he actually uses the same jokes more. Like, there's a lot of jokes he does in these movies where he is just having a character ask another character a question, the character gives a weird answer back to the first character, and then the first character asks why they would give such an answer. It goes a little something like this. Hey, have you seen a blueberry? No, but my toe is blue. What does that have to do with what's going on? I don't know, they're both blue. That's it. That's a lot of his jokes. It's just the same joke kind of told over and over again, just with different, subject matter. And I could list others, but I don't think they're as big as that one. It's the one that I notice a lot watching these movies, and it gets pretty old after a while. If I also had to add another criticism to his movies and like the Peacemaker show, is that he has a lot of characters that are just like in those movies and shows that just kind of don't do anything outside of them just being like a random character from like the comics that's just like injected into the movie for no reason. Even though Polka Dot Man does get an arc in the Suicide Squad movie, it just ends with him dying for like a joke, and the other characters like barely react or seem to notice other than Bloodsport. Like they don't even like mourn him after his death once they're done defeating Starro. They're just like, moving on. There's also Judo Master in the Peacemaker show, who only really serves to be in the show to add a couple fight scenes, because I guess they couldn't just like fill it with a random butterfly instead. They're also just kind of there to like make short jokes and eat hot Cheetos. And I feel like outside of that, they don't really serve any purpose, and it could have been used to give more screen time to other characters who haven't really been developed yet, or developed that well. I don't know, like, it just feels weird why they're just in there for no reason. However, overall, I do think that Gunn handles these projects well than a lot of other people within the DCEU. For one reason, I feel like he makes his characters more human, more relatable. However, despite these criticisms, I still think that Gunn's strengths outweigh his weaknesses. Like, I still really enjoyed his projects within this universe more than I did anyone else's. I feel like if anyone should be given the reins to lead DC into this new era, I feel like out of everyone we have been talking about and will be talking about, he is probably the most fit to do the job. However, he wasn't really the first person to kind of be given the reins, so to speak, and that means we do have to talk about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Now, with this segment, we're going to be diving into whatever the hell The Rock was trying to do with the DCEU. Now, if you felt like I was being, a little bit too critical to the Snyderverse, and while I did a little bit more ranting in that segment, I still think that what Snyder was trying to do overall was a lot better than what The Rock was trying to do with this. But let's get into it, shall we? Now, in order to talk about The Rock first, you might be wondering to yourself, wait, hold on, why are you talking about The Rock first if it's just this one movie? It's because The Rock tried really hard to make things outside of just Black Adam. He tried to really affect the DCEU as a whole. But again, we'll kind of talk about that later, because first off, I want to talk about Black Adam as it is. Now, Black Adam was a film that The Rock was trying to get off the ground for almost a decade, and last year he did get his wish. However, Black Adam wasn't the only thing that The Rock was trying to be very hands-on with when it came to the DCU. Because of The Rock, Henry Cavill did actually make his very short return as Superman in the DCU, mostly because he wanted like a Man of Steel 2 with him and Supes going at it. But some of you may say, well, isn't Black Adam a Shazam villain? Why is he fighting Superman? That's a great question. Because The Rock just wants them to fight. Because with these movies, you could tell that he didn't really care about like trying to do anything outside of just having fight scenes. That's it. He didn't really try to like say anything. Well, you know what? He actually did try to say something with Black Adam, but it really just kind of falls on his face. But we'll get to that eventually again. I mean, hell, in the entire Black Adam movie, there isn't even a mention of Billy Batson or the rest of the Shazam family outside of the Wizard, even though he is like the number one Shazam villain. He's literally his number one villain, and no mention of him at all is like such a disservice. Like, it's very clear that The Rock kind of viewed Black Adam more as his like OC character than an actual character who like has ties to others. Now, from what I remember of what Shazam 2 was supposed to be, is that it was supposed to like act as a sequel to both the first movie but also Black Adam. Before, more than likely, The Rock got more involved and kind of scrapped the idea because he wanted it to be like a Superman Black Adam movie from the jump. I don't know. He has like mentioned Shazam in like interviews, but it doesn't really feel like he has that much desire to see these two go at it. I mean, hell, he seems to have more of a desire to have Black Adam fight Wonder Woman and Aquaman more than he does Shazam. And in my opinion, it just goes to show what Black Adam was meant to be for The Rock, which was just showing him as like the most powerful character within the DCEU. I mean, hell, it was even rumored that The Rock was pushing for a Black Adam versus Justice League versus the Suicide Squad movie. I honestly think he thought that Black Adam was going to be such a success with the DCEU that it would be able to carry it on for years and years and years, when obviously it didn't. Because the Lord knows this movie did not do well critically, and I'm pretty sure it has been viewed as a box office bomb. I mean, the only really good thing I can talk about this movie is the JSA. Like, they are like the only fun part of the movie that I actually really enjoyed. And even then, it's not like amazing. It's still pretty good, but the rest of the movie is just not good at all. Now, jumping into the movie itself, Black Adam was terrible in my opinion. If you just want like a movie that's just full of action, that's fine. I'm not gonna judge you on that. If you did like Black Adam, again, I'm not gonna judge you on that. It's the same opinion I have with the Snyder movies. Just because I don't like them doesn't mean you can't like them, and I'm glad you do. But to me, it just was not good. It's not what I look for in a movie. Just, there was a lot of acting in this movie that was just downright terrible in my opinion. The child actor they got for Amon was just not good with a lot of his lines, and his character overall was just really annoying. I mean, The Rock also gave a terrible performance of the character, seemingly trying to sound very stoic and commanding with every word he says, but the way that he says it, it comes off like he's just kind of phoning it in at every chance he got and was just trying way too hard to try and sound cool. Like, he thought he was being like this big, like, burly man, like, but really he just kind of seemed like he was tired and didn't want to be there. He sounded more like an emotionless robot. Also, the message of this movie is very off. Like, the whole message was you don't need to be a hero to do good, or sometimes you don't like need to. I don't know what the message of this movie is. The best way I could explain it is that in order to do good, you don't need to be a hero. Is, I think, what is a better explanation of what this movie was trying to say. But I mean, if you're willing to help other people with it not really affecting you, doesn't that just make you a hero? Like, the whole, like, a big part of being a hero is being selfless. Like, you're doing things for other people instead of yourself, and he does do that in this movie. He fights the main bad guy because he knows that if he doesn't, other people would get hurt. He needs to be the hero, but they keep saying throughout this movie that he's not a hero, and that he doesn't need to be a hero, but he is a hero. It's just, what? I mean, is it just because he kills people? Like, again, I don't think that's good. I don't think you should be killing people, but I also like Deadpool, and he kills people. Like, I'm fine with, like, these morally gray characters, like Black Adam, but you can't say he's not a little bit of a hero when he's doing hero stuff. It just feels weird. I don't know. It feels like they're trying really hard just not to be like, he's a superhero now. But, like, he can still be a superhero. He's just a little bit more gray than, like, Superman and Wonder Woman. And before I end this, I just want to say I did really like the JSA in this movie. It's really the only part of this movie I actually really liked. And I honestly wouldn't mind seeing more of them in the future. Hell, I would love to see like a JSA series with Hawkman, Atom Smasher, and Cyclone with like the characters from Stargirl. Which, from what I heard, is basically just kind of a JSA show now anyway. So, I don't know, just combine the two. I think that would be fun. Now, with this part of the video, I thought about talking about like the other works outside of like the parts of the DCEU that I already mentioned, like Aquaman, Wonder Woman, stuff like that. I know Wonder Woman and Aquaman take references from like the Snyderverse and are in the same continuity, but I feel like they're very much their own movies that they don't really count. But like what I said, I don't think it would really serve a purpose, because those movies I don't feel like were meant to serve as a sort of like marching order for the DCEU as much as they are supposed to be their own little thing, almost like completely separated from the rest of the universe. Like, Aquaman doesn't need to be a good movie because it's in the Snyderverse. I just think it's a good movie overall that mentions the films connected to it sometimes. And I do think it is a good thing that these movies, while still being a part of an interconnected universe, are still very much their own thing. Now, that doesn't mean they're all good, but it does mean that they aren't beholden to the continuity as much as the MCU tends to be, which allows them to tell their own story with their own feel. Which I think is good because it allows more people to get into this franchise since it has a wider option of storytelling. But instead, I wanted to use this part to kind of talk about the direction the DCEU seemed like they were going in before James Gunn took control. Now, due to Warner Brothers wanting to get away from like Ben Affleck's Batman, Henry Cavill's Superman, and just kind of where like Snyder wanted to go with the DCEU in general, this led them to want to focus more on their younger female counterparts, Batgirl and Supergirl, so they could kind of just get away from like the stink of Ben Affleck's Batman and Henry Cavill's Superman. I'm not saying that they suck. I'm not saying that I didn't like them. I really did. I did like them in their roles. I'm just saying it. I it felt like they wanted to like take some time before they reintroduced like a new solo Batman movie or a new solo Superman movie. Now, Supergirl is in the Flash movie, but that was a setup for them to kind of break her off in her own movie alongside Batgirl coming off the heels of Michael Keaton's Batman after he showed up in the Flash. However, due to the WB Discovery merger, WB Discovery scrapped the whole fully made Batgirl movie to cover their finances after the merger. And before anyone comments, no, it's not because the movie is apparently terrible. It's because they were trying to save cost measures. Because, in all honesty, even if the movie did suck, I mean, this is still the same studio who released Shazam! Fury of the Gods very recently. So really, they have no excuse to why like they just booted this movie if they think it's bad when they come out with bad movies anyways. Like, it was pretty obvious they only really did this for money. And even then, even if they think the movie wasn't good, that doesn't mean the audience wouldn't think it's good. I mean, there's plenty of movies that they were hyping a lot that just fell on their face. It shouldn't be their decision on whether or not a fully made movie ready to be released should be released or not. It just kind of sucks. However, I'm going to move on from that and continue to talk about the direction that the DCEU was going to take. Now, apparently everything was supposed to lead to a Crisis on Infinite Earths movie after the Flash movie, with it leaving off with Michael Keaton being the Batman in the main universe, and with Ben Affleck's Batman possibly being in another universe. However, with James Gunn now leading the cinematic universe, WB scrapped these plans entirely. However, we still could get a Sasha Khalil's Supergirl? I believe that's how you pronounce her name, Sasha Khalil? If I got it wrong, someone tell me in the comments. I don't know. Now, she still could get her own movie in the DC Studios, kind of. Depends on if they recast her or not. Now, speaking of DC Studios, let's talk about DC Studios and the DCU. Now, James Gunn's new direction with the DCEU is now called the DC Universe, which I don't really think is a great name. But anyways, let's move on. With anything outside of that, such as the Joker movie and the Batman being labeled as Elseworlds, a reference to the comic book label of the same name. Now, the DCU has been described by Gunn as a media franchise to tell the stories they want to tell through any media such as movies, shows, animation, and even video games, which he did explain would more than likely be used to like bridge gaps between certain projects and wouldn't play too much of a factor in the overall story, but I don't know, still seems pretty cool depending on how well it's executed. However, something Gunn has been very apparent on is both allowing the creators of these movies to tell their own stories, with some elements being used to service the overall story of the universe, and being more flexible with set projects in terms of release dates, as well as certain deadlines that the movie needs to make in terms of its production and filming. Now, CEO of DC Studios, alongside James Gunn, Peter Safran, said that while some projects will need to be released at a certain time in terms of the story narrative, a couple of projects are being allowed to be flexible in terms of release date and deadlines. Now, overall, I really like what Gunn and Safran are trying to do with the DCU, allowing creators to have a more flexible workspace by being open to multiple forms of media is very much something I'm excited about, because it allows creators to tell the stories they want to create in the way that they intend them to be told. And I think giving creators absolute freedom will lead to a very big high point of both fan approval and maybe even critic approval, depending on how well these projects do, of course. Now, I'm going to talk about the DCEU projects themselves, and it's mostly just going to be me kind of describing them, maybe giving my opinions on them here and there. First off, let's talk about the two first projects within the DCU, the Creature Commandos and Waller, which both kind of are acting as sequels to both the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. The Creature Commandos is a team assembled by Waller, featuring a bunch of DC's monsters such as Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, G.I. Robot, and Weasel from the Suicide Squad. And Rick Flag Sr. will be the father to the Rick Flag Jr. that we got in the 2016 Suicide Squad movie, as well as the Suicide Squad movie. Now, Waller is kind of said to be like a sequel to Peacemaker, with the series focusing on Waller and a team from Peacemaker, with Viola Davis reprising her role as Amanda Waller, and the guy who plays John Economist, whatever his name is. I'm not great with names, right? Now, Gunn has said that the characters will be played by the same people, whether it's live action or animation, so any characters that do get introduced in either Creature Commandos or Amanda Waller's series, so any characters that show up in these projects moving forward will be those characters, regardless of the medium. However, even though the Creature Commandos is supposed to be the first project in the DCU, Gunn has said that Superman Legacy will be seen as the official start of the DCU. Now, Superman Legacy will be directed by James Gunn himself and will take inspiration from All-Star Superman, which, if you want to watch my review on, you can check out my other channel, Fruity, where I do comic book reviews, just saying. The video should be right here, I believe. This is where they go, right? Now, while it does feature a young Superman, it has been said it won't serve as an origin story, but more of a movie that just focuses on Superman's morals in a world that considers them old-fashioned. Now, due to it being a younger Superman, Henry Cavill isn't really set to return as Superman, and a younger actor will be set to replace him. And in my opinion, I'm really looking forward to this. It feels like it really kind of speaks to what I was saying earlier with Snyder's portrayal of Superman. And while I do believe that you can tell a character in a way they are not traditionally told, something that I feel like Snyder didn't really do successfully with Superman is keep it consistent. I feel like there was a lot of moments that didn't really match up with what the character was presented as, and hopefully with Gunn now at the helm of Superman, we can kind of get some consistency with the character. We also have the Authority, a team of superheroes who will be a little bit more gray in terms of morality, and whose members will be revealed in Superman Legacy. Now, I have heard some people complain about the Authority being picked up for a movie, but like I said, no one knew who the Guardians of the Galaxy were before their movie, so who cares? As long as these characters are portrayed in a way that the audience can kind of connect to them, that's all that really matters. You can make big names out of anyone these days. It's not impossible. We also have The Brave and the Bold, which is set to focus around Batman's relationship with his son Damian Wayne as Robin, and it's going to be heavily based around Grant Morrison's run on Batman from the late 2000s, with the director Andy Muschietti. Again, I'm not good with names. Supposedly set to direct, but really hasn't fully committed to the project due to the current writer's strike. We also have Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, based on the comic of the same name, which will focus on Supergirl and how her being raised on a dying Krypton would differ from Clark, who was raised on Earth, and basically how that would affect her life going forward. Now, it hasn't been confirmed if the actress from The Flash would reprise her role as Supergirl, but it has been rumored that she might. Depends. Who knows? I mean, they are keeping some things from the original DCU. Might as well bring her on board. She was supposed to get her own movie anyways, and that got scrapped. Might as well give her a second chance with this one. There's also Swamp Thing, which is set to be directed by James Mangold. Mangold? might be Mangold. However, he is currently busy with other projects, so maybe he's not like locked into it. It has been said that this is like a personal project of his, so who knows. Now, it has been reported that Swamp Thing will be a darker tone, with the rest of the projects in the DCU being inspired by Alan Moore's Saga of Swamp Thing run. Now, personally, I really like the Swamp Thing show that was supposed to be for like DC Universe when that was like its own app. And if they're able to keep a darker tone like they did with the show, I feel like it would be a great way to differentiate itself from the rest of the DCU. And if it gets made, I'll be more than likely to be watching it opening night, because Swamp Thing is just one of those characters who I've always kind of been one of those characters that I never really fully got into, but I always kind of been curious about. Now, most of those projects from like Superman Legacy to Swamp Thing have been like the movies of the DCU. However, the series of the DCU are going to be Lanterns, Project Lost, and Booster Gold. Now, Lanterns is said to be a detective story about Hal Jordan and John Stewart on Earth, which is set up to be a series that will set up the larger story of DCU as a whole. In my opinion, I'm curious to what that means. Like, we don't really have any idea what the DCU is going to be like moving forward, but again, we only really know a base level of information regarding it anyways, so I'm curious what is going to be set up in the series. I'm also a little bit curious how they're going to do a space cop drama only on Earth. I don't know, it's kind of weird. I'm probably still going to watch it anyways when it comes out, if it comes out, that is. I mean, Green Lantern hasn't really had the best history with series trying to get greenlit and just falling apart, so who knows. Paradise Lost is going to be a Game of Thrones-esque series that takes place on Themyscira before the birth of Wonder Woman. And finally, Booster Gold, a loser from the future who comes back in time to be a superhero. And that's just kind of it. Again, we only really know the base level knowledge when it comes to most of these projects, so there's not much to talk about. However, something you could garner from these projects is how different they are from one another just from their descriptions alone. Now, while the DCEU had other projects outside the Snyderverse and the like, a couple of them still felt very similar without feeding into the overall narrative. Now, while I don't care much about some of these projects like Paradise Lost and Booster Gold, I still am excited for the new direction of DC Cinematic Universe because it allows projects to be a lot more than just the same thing over and over again, which is a heavy criticism that the MCU is facing and a criticism that you could give to a lot of the DCEU projects, where they just kind of felt like they were emulating the MCU style instead of just being their own thing and telling the stories they wanted to tell. Now, before I go, I do want to rank off my current favorite DCEU projects before this universe dies off later this year, starting with number 5 with Justice League The Snyder Cut. Now, overall, I think this was my favorite Snyder work within the universe. Well, I still definitely have my problems with the movie, and I wouldn't say glad, but I'm not going to miss the Snyderverse going forward. I still felt like this was a good starting point for what could have been a great little trilogy of what Snyder wanted to do. However, I feel like some of the weaknesses within Snyder's works kind of would have stopped it from doing that. But again, like I said, with a lot of Snyder's work, there still are moments of these movies that are good, and I feel like there's quite a bit of moments in the Snyder Cut that makes it better than the projects that came before it and the projects that don't adhere to the Snyderverse and the DCEU. Number 4, I'm going to go with Birds of Prey. Now, this was the only one I haven't seen before doing this video, and I really enjoyed it. It was a fun movie, and it was a big step forward for Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, because I wasn't really a big fan of her character in the Suicide Squad, like the first one. And it wasn't like she was like bad as Harley Quinn. She was great. I just didn't like the material she was given. But in this movie, I just really liked her as Harley Quinn, as well as like the other actresses with their characters like Black Canary Huntress, Renee Montoya, Cassandra Cain. I've just really liked this movie overall. Ewan McGregor, the actor who played Obi-Wan Kenobi, was really good as a Black Mask. I really liked him as a villain. overall, this was just like a really fun movie and something I would definitely watch again. Now, number 3, I would probably switch out a Birds of Prey in retrospect when I'm doing this list. So, yeah, I'm gonna put this as number 4 instead. Birds of Prey is number 3. This is number 4, Peacemaker. Now, overall, I did like the series. The characters are great, but my problem with the story with the butterflies is that I didn't really care that much about it. I was a lot more into the story with Peacemaker and his father, and that just kind of felt like it was more of the B plot. But overall, it was still a really good series, and I really liked it. And hopefully, we can get a season 2 because I think John Cena killed it as Peacemaker, and I would love to see him return in the role in this series. Okay, now number 2. So we got Snyder Cut, Peacemaker, Birds of Prey, and then Aquaman. Oh yeah, Aquaman's my number 2. I probably should have said that. Now, again, I really love Aquaman. It's just a really fun soul movie. I love Jason Momoa as Aquaman, and damn, he does make that suit work. A suit that I thought would never look good in live action really works with Jason Momoa. And this movie is just really fun. I've heard a lot of things about how the sequel is probably not going to be good, and that it's not going to be like a good outing for the DCEU. I'm still going to see it though. I really like Jason Momoa as Aquaman, and I just really hope it's as good as this first one. And speaking of number 1, I gotta go with the Suicide Squad. Way better than the 2016 one. This is just such a fun movie that I can just rewatch over and over and over again. And it, alongside Guardians Volume 3, has really made me excited for what James Gunn could be doing with the DCU going forward. Anyways, that's all for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this video, and I'll catch you all next time. See ya.